Emerson. For everybody else that's joining, thank you for joining us today and welcome to another Lunch with Launch. Launch is our college's hub for entrepreneurship and innovation. And so our macro mission is to help any aspiring entrepreneur at Emerson to succeed. And so one of the things that we do is we bring the outside in, and this Lunch with Launch series is about that. So it's about bringing the outside in, learning, discussing, and hopefully inspiring as well. So great to have you all with us. Special thanks to my BC 110 class, which is the core of the session today. And but we've opened it up to the college, so we have more than just 110 with us today as well. So hey, so we're really it's a pleasure to have Marlo Custodio, who's the founder of NEEBA and BAM Productions, with us today. And the topic that we're going to talk about is community building, and particularly community building, gentrification, and storytelling. So Marlo, welcome. Thank you very much for giving us the time.
Thank you for having me here, and good morning, everybody. I'm looking forward to connecting with y'all for this next hour.
Yeah. Hey, so just a couple housekeeping notes. If you could all go on mute so you don't embarrass yourselves. We are recording the session, number one. We're going to run a Q&A session for about roughly 40-45 minutes or so. And then we'll have 10-15 minutes of open Q&A from anyone in the audience. So please put your questions in the chat. Before we leave, I'd like to also take a picture. So I've asked Tammy Laura to help us with that. At the end, before we go to the Q&A, we'll probably take a group picture together for social media perspectives, which you all are much more versed than I am. So that's how it's going to go. Also, just for some context, my class and I have started this budding tradition that we start every class with a song, Marlo. And for those that aren't in the class. And so last time we heard Jay-Z and Kanye. Week before we heard Pop Smoke, Fabulous, Genuine. And I thought we'd start with Too Short today. Definitely the OG of rap, and relevant because Marlo has actually worked with him and done some videos with him in Oaktown as well. So great to have you with us. So let's get started. Marlo and I talked a little bit about his background. He's got a really varied background, a young guy and a young career, but a really varied background, film student, community activist and organizer, founder, worked with big brands, worked with rappers and musicians. And Marlo, maybe you can just start us off by talking a little bit about kind of how you got into the game and where your journey started.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Sanjay. It's a pleasure to be able to connect with y'all. It's a real honor and privilege. I always love sharing my story, sharing my journey. So thank you, everyone at Emerson, and thank you for everybody that's on this call right now. I grew up in San Jose, particularly East Side San Jose. I grew up in a single mother household. I have 3 brothers, and growing up, I've always kind of felt like I've always wondered like why things were the way they were for my family and the people and the communities around me that I grew up at. Just not having the kind of support system or not having, I think, an education that could really propel me to what I felt like other communities had, more affluent communities had. So actually, I'm a very proud community college student. De Anza Community College is where I felt I actually had an ability to obtain a higher education and also be seen as a student. And what I mean by that is being seen for my potential, being looked beyond, from at the time, the turbulence of my youth, being looked beyond of like my behavioral issues or just the way I carried myself. I felt like once I got to De Anza, there were professors and a community that really embraced me, that really embraced where I'm from and what I believed in. And so De Anza Community College was really what I felt like propelled me to my passions, and I really felt supported. And so that's when I transferred to UC Santa Cruz. I studied political science. I got my associate's degree in liberal arts. And when I got to UC Santa Cruz, I took this Asian Americans in cinema class, and I was just like, damn, this is what I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted, in that class, I really learned the history of how Asian Americans were being portrayed, and through the last century of cinema. Um, and that's when I really felt my calling. I wanted to combine my social justice advocate work, my community organizing work. Once I got to UC Santa Cruz, I took that class. I was like, man, I'm gonna go all the way with film. And so I went all the way with film. Um, didn't look back. Once I graduated from UC Santa Cruz, I knew I wanted to do something with filmmaking and community building, filmmaking and youth development. I knew I wanted to do something to come back to my community, to come back to the neighborhoods where I'm from. And that's when I worked at the city of San Jose. And at the city of San Jose is where I was only getting like 10 hours a week. For all y'all, when you guys graduate, from college, you're gonna see what it's like to deal with um, the post grad struggles, right? To give you a sense, like it's at least 6 months to a year before you actually land a job, land a gig. And for me, when I got out of college, I wanted to just find something that had something to do with film. I didn't want to do some kind of activity or job that had nothing to do with what I was gunning for. And so had an opportunity at one community center to start a program teaching filmmaking, teaching photography, and I was only getting 10 hours a week. Um, it was I saw it as an opportunity to do something, to start something up, and within that 6 months, I was doing like 40 hours a week, and I was just, even though I was only getting paid 10 hours a week, I got to a point where um, I did this music video that really changed the course of my career in the city of San Jose, Parks and Recreation Neighborhood Services Department. Um, there was a shooting that happened in one of the community centers, Alma Community Center in the west side of San Jose, and one of the kids that went to that community center, he passed away, and one of the brothers there, he would attend that community center, and this was a family that was going through a real tribulation, and the older brother was in jail, the father was in jail, and this group of brothers grew up in this community center, and so we it was at this time we're like, you know what, let's dedicate what we're creating to this family, to spread awareness. And so one of the artists from that neighborhood, he just got out of juvie, and he was trying to work his way to back into public education, and he wrote a verse. My colleague at the time wrote the produced the instrumental, and we're like, you know what, let's do a music video to this. Let's dedicate it to the neighborhood. And I just really wanted to tell the story about how to deal with something like this, how to not pursue revenge, how to make something better out of yourself. And so we did that music video, and little did we know, like 6 months from then, that we would get first place out of 1,500 submissions through the Adobe Youth Voices International Film Festival. And that changed everything. We went from this little program that I started just 10 hours a week to suddenly sharing that citywide. And the city was like, where was this from? Who made this? Who did this? And then we told them, oh, there's a young filmmaker did this, a young filmmaker in one of your community centers. And from there, our program got heavily funded, and yeah, and I felt like that was a true highlight to my career. I think that really started me off, De Anza Community College, and then just community building, and starting a program in the city of San Jose. Um,
So Marlo, so basically, so you graduated school, you went to work for the city, you're working with one center teaching youth about film and video production. You did this video basically, it's called a patience video, right? And you submitted it and you won the award, and then basically you got notice from the suits, if you will, at the city. And so they gave you more funding and they started to fund the program, right?
yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then so then what happened? Like, did they start kind of supporting you, and then what were you doing while this was going on?
So yeah, so as you would imagine, I went from one community center, and then our program went to 5 community centers. And so 5 community centers around San Jose, we call them the hotspots. And these community centers were known we call them hotspots because it was known for youth violence. It was known for gang activity. And so we really believed in this mission that we were returning to these community centers to provide professional mentorship and to also just personal growth development. And so it really took people that were not only like content creators, filmmakers, but it really took people that were also from these neighborhoods where these youth can relate to. And so what ended up happening was the program got recognized.
For you, it's more than a job. You actually saw it as a way to build your community, train people, tell their stories, and so it became more than a job.
Yup, hell yeah! Like it was a mission, and we had a vision, and yeah, and I think it takes a set of ideologies to be able to, and skill set to be able to do the work that we were doing. um, and we grew the program, we got it recognized internationally, um, and the program was just no longer in our control anymore. The higher ups took the program, and for whatever reason, I totally understand. Probably for um, you know a different leadership, someone in middle management got assigned to like our program, and it just didn't flourish from there. They didn't really understand what we were doing. They just thought we were just trying to make rappers. I remember the mayor said something about, oh, are we here doing youth development? Are we here to make rappers out of kids? And it was just like, man, you're totally missing the point. Because when you get into writing, when you get into storytelling, it's a really deep search of the hero's journey. It's a really deep search of trying to understand who you are and why you are the way you are. And I felt like that's what we were doing. There was a lot of healing, a lot of healing for the youth there, a lot of trauma. And so music was a way to express. Music was and film was a way and an avenue for us to reach out to them. And so it was really unfortunate that people that the higher ups didn't understand our program, and eventually it would crumble.
Well, so this isn't anything new. I mean, this story has been happening, for time, from the beginning of time, right? A young entrepreneur starts to do something. The higher ups, if you will, don't pay attention. Suddenly, it gets some attention and some notice, and it starts in kind of the corner, and then suddenly, basically, the mission and vision get usurped. So you get kind of pushed aside, if you will. And I mean, and everybody on the call has experienced this or is going to experience this in corporate America, right? And
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Jobs got pushed out of Apple. We talked about Adam Newman at WeWork, and I mean, obviously for different reasons, got pushed out of WeWork. Travis Kalanick got pushed out of Uber, and I'm sure there's like hundreds of stories like this. So while this was going on, and you were starting to feel quote unquote marginalized, right? You were doing some like a side hustle as well, right?
Yeah. So on the side, I'm a filmmaker. So while I'm passionate about youth development, the neighborhoods, like I'm still connected to my hometown, and so I was doing a lot of music videos for a lot of friends, um, and I was also on the side teaching for a nonprofit where I was teaching I was teaching for incarcerated youth, and doing the same thing but through a different same thing. What I mean as like same thing as like teaching storytelling and filmmaking, but for like a different organization. And so through that nonprofit, I started developing my own portfolio of creating for nonprofits.
Yeah. So this is helpful, like, because I think a lot of us are going to go out in the corporate world. You're going to have your kind of regular job, but so you have this side hustle going where you're doing video production and storytelling and branding work primarily for nonprofits, and then ultimately for brands, right? So you had your kind of big break where you got this opportunity to work with Jamba Juice, and clearly not a nonprofit but a corporate gig to tell their story. Maybe you can share that, how that came about, and kind of that experience. I think would be useful for all of us to hear.
Yeah. So man, like if you're only as good as your last work, right? And that's kind of like how like I feel like the journey was at that time. It's like whatever I did was going to get me the next gig. And so I did a nonprofit video and the person that happened to run that nonprofit was, you know, Super Bowl winner Vernon Davis. Um, and he uh, he had a foundation, the Vernon Davis Foundation of the Arts. We did a killer, you know, an awesome, heart-touching um, nonprofit video for him, and his manager really loved my work, really loved my passion, and he asked me, "Hey, have you ever shot a commercial before?" And I was like, "No, I haven't." But damn, what's up? Like, what do I need to do, like, to close this deal? What I need to do to close this gig? And
So,
and then
so to be clear, so Vernon Davis, tight end for the Niners, and then ultimately the Redskins. Is he still playing?
he's actually retired. He's
Okay.
pursuing a career in acting, and he's actually in this season of Dancing with the Stars.
Okay, got it. So he has a nonprofit. You did a video for his nonprofit, and he's doing corporate sponsorship work for Jamba Juice. And so they wanted to do a commercial. And so here's your opportunity to bid for a corporate commercial.
Absolutely, it was my opportunity to bid for it. Didn't know what the hell I was doing. I didn't even know what the first steps were. So I asked the manager. I was just of Vernon Davis. I was like, "What do I need to do to close this? What do I need to create a deck? Do I need what do I need to do?" And so he really, um, he really showed me the way, man. And I feel like if I didn't ask how to do it, I probably wouldn't have gone it. You know, I feel like some people are afraid to look stupid or afraid like they don't know what they're doing. But at this moment, I really wanted to see how I'd be able to close that gig.
No, listen, I think this is useful for everybody on the phone because, I mean, not only are we here to talk about community building and actually all of these lunch and learn sessions, it's community building today, but it's also about your career journey and how you made it. So I remember actually talking to you about like, hey, how do you even price the job, right? Price the job and include expenses and all that. So how did that work? You ended up winning it?
Yeah. So at the time, like you can't really like find rates. This was like, you know, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Now you can just Google it and everyone's rates are like online. But like I remember we had to try to figure out some rates, and so he gave us like tips, and so I had to go do like this dance. I had to like come up with like a proposal within the day, and so yeah, I ended up winning it. And I remember like I almost lost it because like I was on the conversation on the phone, and I just sounded like such an amateur. The questions I was asking. And then he called me after that, and he was just like, "Hey, you're gonna lose this job if you keep asking dumb questions like that." And I was like, "Oh shit, you're right." So that was like my very growing pains, just trying to close that project. And man, I was so thankful to close it, and it really changed everything else from there.
So this is a Jamba Juice commercial that you and your crew basically went and filmed with Vernon Davis where in DC and then how did that production go and what did they do with the output? Like, I mean, is it on TV, YouTube? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, it was on. Ended up being shared online. I think mainly web and their media sets for their socials. Um, and it was, yeah, it was my first time in DC. We went to the neighborhood where he grew up at. We hung out with his grandma. We met with his first football coach, um, and we told this story. And it was a very inspiring piece and really connected with Vernon. And from then on, we would always have this relationship with him. And yeah, it was a success.
Nice. So basically, this gave you an opportunity to kind of work with Davis, but also Jamba Juice marketing, corporate marketing. You do the piece, and so I mean, there's a lot of learning here where you're working with a corporation, if you will, right? It's your first commercial gig. You're working with a corporation, and of course Vernon and telling his story.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
By the way, for those on the phone, I mean, we wanted to share some of this, but we thought it'd just be too cumbersome to share screen with a lot of Marlo's work. So in the subsequent email that we send out, we'll add some of the links so you guys can take a look. And by the way, so since then you've worked with the likes of Google, Asus, Hershey's, but I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of your music video pieces. So I mean, so you're still doing. So now this has become your main gig, right? Your main gig is working with corporate brands, but you still have a side hustle working with basically what East Bay, South Bay, Bay Area up and coming rappers. Um, and would love to, like, how did that go? Like, how's the video? Like, what's the most memorable rap video experience that you can share with us?
Oh man, um, there's a lot of memorable moments. I think the most, the highlight for me, probably the most appropriate to share. The highlight for me is, when Trax a Million wanted to shoot a music video. And, growing up, Trax a Million, he was like responsible for like the hyphy movement. He was like the producer behind the hyphy movement in the
And
Bay
so the
Area.
hyphy is east. This is out of the Bay Area, right? Hyperactive.
Yeah, this is out in the Bay Area. It's the sound. It's the
My
particular
class
type of
doesn't think
sound.
my class doesn't think I'm tapped into all this, but I am.
Sanjay's from the Bay, so he knows. He knows. Um, yeah, so um, Trax a Million wanted a music video done, and met with his manager, and I just remember just the kind of the hype that was around this, because at the time I started getting really known locally, and people were just like, "Who the hell is Director Marlo?" They were like, "What is BAM? Like, what the hell?" Like, everyone just started seeing like just so much content coming out of coming from my brand and my company. Um, I just remember we needed to get a mansion, and I was like, this idea of like shooting this like debauchery of a party, and yeah, I just remember like hustling to find a mansion, and I was like, you know what, I think I know how to find a mansion through my Filipino community network. I'm sure there's someone like a rich uncle or auntie out there that wants to help out a young emerging filmmaker, a Pinoy filmmaker. Oh, by the way, it's Filipino American History Month. I just want to say happy Filipino American History Month to
All right.
everybody. Um, and yeah, I just remember like just trying to hustle to find a mansion, and we ended up finding a mansion before production, and we had like this huge party at this mansion. It was like we were filming like a crazy like a party scene, and I just remember just the sense of community that it took to make that happen. And what I mean by that is just people from all walks of life just really believed in the production. They wanted to be a part of it. It really reflected the diversity of Silicon Valley, of the South Bay and the Bay Area. And that it really inspired me, because that really showed me that when you're doing something and your heart's in it, and you're doing it for the right reasons, like people will gravitate to you. And I just remember just that feeling of putting that together, and it was a huge accomplishment. It got on, I think it was Hip Hop DX, and that actually led to a lot of other opportunities for me, to eventually work with Andre Nicotina and then Too Short.
Good, good. So what's happening is you're doing brand work on your own. You're doing music videos, and so your brand is getting known in the Bay. And so then, kind of an interesting turn, the Knight Foundation, which for the audience is basically a nonprofit. It's $1 billion nonprofit. They give out about 400 grants a year at roughly about 100 million. They're focused on community building, arts, and journalism. So the Knight Foundation actually started out about 100 years ago with newspapers, local community newspapers like the Akron Beacon, the Miami Herald, the San Jose Mercury. And the Knight brothers, who started these newspapers, started this foundation. And they really believed that building informed and engaged communities help with democracy, right? And are big believers that an engaged community leads to an essential and healthy democracy. So what happened? So the Knight Foundation heard about your work. They have a fellowship, right? That's a competition that you applied for, and were able to win this Knight Fellowship, where you're able to go and learn from the best in terms of community building. Is that, I mean, like, that's
Exactly,
kind of level, but
exactly. So
share,
like,
like what happened there.
yeah, so I'm doing music videos for local artists, for my friends. I did this music video for a local artist, and the new program director of the Knight Foundation saw my music video. And you wouldn't think, like, it's a different world. The music video and the community building, they're just two different worlds. But he saw it and he was intrigued, and he reached out to me, and he wanted to know what else I was doing for the city, and branding for the culture of the city. and a program popped open called the Emerging City Champions, and the criteria was anyone that's that's doing any work of bringing community together and whatnot. And so I applied for it. It's a fellowship across the country. They selected like 3 people from each city, and I got accepted into the fellowship. And then I went from I took a flight to Toronto, and at Toronto is where I started learning about city developing, urban planners, and community organizers, like right in
Stop.
doing things
Hello.
within the city. Hello.
Please put yourself on mute. Thank you. So Marlo, so you're doing brand building, corporate building, you're doing music videos, the city and the Knight Foundation hear about all this stuff. It's kind of serendipity that, you know, you're doing video and video production and film, and you have this passion for community building, and so you apply for this Knight Foundation fellowship, you win it. They pay you a stipend and fly you to Toronto. Why? Because that's where they have all these emerging city champions, and they're teaching you guys about how to use communication, multimedia to tell the story. So you're in Toronto learning all this stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And it was here. It was hosted through 880 Cities. Knight Foundation collaborated with 880 Cities, and 880 Cities. Their philosophy is, if you could build a city for an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old, then you have a perfect city. And so through this whole fellowship, we were learning ways on how creatives, artists, activists, organizers, educators, how we could energize our city to really think about the people that live in it. And so it was like my first time being in Toronto. What an amazing city. One of the most multicultural cities in the world. And it was almost like I could see what is possible in America. It was almost like what I could see what was possible in the city of San Jose. San Jose is known for the highest homelessness encampments. It's known for the wealth inequities in Silicon Valley. And so it was there where I saw mixed use communities. It was there, or mixed income communities. And what was that, Sanjay?
In Toronto, you mean?
In
right?
Toronto, I saw what was possible. Mixed income community.
So maybe you could share some of that. Like, I mean, what is Toronto doing so well that we can learn from in terms of, you know, community building, you know, equality, forestalling gentrification? Like, what are some specific things that they're doing that we here can learn from?
They and you know, from speaking from like several panelists and politicians and community organizers there, they really organized. They really got so involved in their political system to make sure that they saw things so that they could see change. One of the things that they really got engaged in and involved in was voting, making sure the right people were in the right positions of power, and then also just getting really is advocating and getting involved in the process. This idea of a mixed income neighborhood wouldn't have happened without grassroots organizing and as well as advocacy work for policies and initiatives. And so that was just really fascinating to see, just a community really wanting to, that really kind of took agency. And so what I saw was like a mixed use neighborhood where mixed income neighborhood, and it was like people were they had a park where there was a lot of activities, just people from all walks of life really gravitating toward this park. And it was yeah, it was a real pleasure to see. It's something that I wish I could see more of in San Jose. Providing more affordable housing for community members.
So what you saw in Toronto is basically the need for all constituencies to organize, to come together, to talk about thoughtful ways in terms of how we're going to have city planning and city building. You saw specific things like, you know, this mixed income kind of neighborhood, things in the park, things of that sort. And so then you went back to San Jose, and ironically, the Knight Foundation asked you to start telling the story of San Jose. So I mean, just kind of an ironic twist. You had started with the city of San Jose. Now you're back in San Jose, basically funded by the Knight Foundation to tell the story of San Jose, right? And
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, at Toronto, what I also realize is the power of the artist, the power of the storyteller, the power of what you have to change your community. And what I mean by that, there was like some awesome projects that I never even thought of, right? There was one project in Akron where they closed off the entire street and they set up like picnic tables in the middle of the street and asked community members to eat together. It's just like random projects like that that just blew my mind away. And so you did I never saw the connection between being a filmmaker and an artist and how that would play a role in anti-gentrification work as well as building community. And so I get back.
that's a pretty
Yeah,
powerful statement. So as all of us on the phone, go off in our college careers and our careers, I mean, and we've talked a lot about kind of creativity and the importance of creativity, but you actually saw how creativity and storytelling can be used to impact cities and society at large.
exactly. And so I got back. I started telling these stories called "We Are San Jose." This is San Jose. Um, and yeah, I mean, you know, at this time, I'm no longer working in the city anymore, and now I'm actually now I'm being asked to brand the city, and so just telling unique stories of mom and pop shops in San Jose, telling unique stories that make San Jose, um, you know, just historical areas like where Cesar Chavez, you know, lived in San Jose. Um, so being from San Jose, I really started telling these stories that that no one really knew about in our hometown.
So
And
I know we don't have the benefit of the videos, unfortunately, but could you share like one or two examples of so you have this We Are San Jose series, and you're going around to local business people, right? Like local small businesses and getting to know them and telling their stories. So I remember, I think it was like the tattoo parlor or like
yeah, yeah.
what were some examples of stories and then what did you do with them? So we filmed them and then what did the city do with them?
Yeah, so I I told a story of a Vietnamese immigrant starting their business from scratch, you know, and then now starting their business from their home, and then now being able to be in a very hustle and bustle space in downtown San Jose. Told a story about a Filipino American tattoo artist who's just recognized globally for his work. He started from his garage, and and yeah, people all around the world come to San Jose to get tatted by him. So I told these just unique stories and these unique people that make San Jose San Jose, and and it you know it was an initiative through the Office of Economic Development Department, Visit San Jose, and the Knight Foundation, and my project from my time at Toronto, I started the BAM initiative, and that's where I had a lot local artists from all different mediums, media and forms and expressions, and we hosted a network and chill event, and the network and chill um, really brought together a lot of people emerging and established all around the Bay into San Jose.
So interesting turn of developments. So you're back with the Knight Foundation, telling the stories of This is San Jose. Simultaneously, you decide to start this BAM platform. And by the way, BAM stands for?
By any media necessary.
And so basically, it's your own initiative, you and your supporters. It's a local initiative to kind of bring the community and community organizers and activists together. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. And we did that through, you know, film production, events, skits, stories, um and you know, we at the time had my own studio, so it was so active. To give a glimpse of what it was like is when someone came in at 7 a.m. to start, someone was just leaving to wrap up their session. And so it was a true hub for emerging artists in San Jose at the time.
Yeah. And so now from the city's perspective, like what is their motive for telling the story to basically increase tourism to tell a positive story? How was that received? So you're interacting with these people that you had kind of initially started with, and now you're back, but now you're telling the stories.
Shit, man. It's like the city just always finds ways to like break my heart in a thousand pieces, man. Like it just, they wanted me to tell stories to brand the city, right? And that's that's what we did. We showed like a very colorful side of San Jose. The previous commercials that they've created and content they created, the lens that they were wearing came from a perspective that wasn't from a hometown, wasn't from a local, and that wasn't really wearing like a multicultural, diverse kind of lens, right? Um, Everyone that they portrayed in these videos were white, and it's just like what, like you have to like show the true diversity of the city, and so that's what my commercials did. That's what my content did. It showed a real authentic perspective of San Jose, and the purpose of it is to get the Office of Economic Development's department. Their purpose was to get a lot of young workers to want to choose San Jose to live, work, and play, and that was the purpose of the whole series and the content. And there was a, a I remember clearly what they said to me by verbatim. It was we want to do this and to support millennials, and we want to do this to support millennials that want to work here and live here. And it was just an interesting, it was just kind of ironic because you want to support millennials, and here I am, a millennial that's actually from the city, that lives and works and plays from the city, but you want to not build with me and move forward. It was interesting because they wanted to take my content. There was this aspect of, could you give us the footage? Could we have your content? We want to support millennials. And I've kind of, it, it was again a moment where I felt like I was being overlooked again, and we were in a conversation of business, because I was more than willing to provide my content, as long as there was like a collaboration, or even if I could license it to them. But again, it was just again the city wanting to take and use my work and not give me credit and push it out there, and so that was a very heartbreaking moment, because it's like, man, I've done so much for the city, from teaching youth to setting up these community centers, and then here I am again trying to do something for the city again, for my artists and for the branding and of San Jose, and
So,
yeah,
so just so we understand, so basically you've done these videos that tell the story of San Jose kind of truly. The city liked them and wanted them, but didn't want to pay you for them. That's kind of question one, and
yeah,
that's leading us to this question of, I think, this question around gentrification, right? So we read about kind of Williamsburg, gentrifying, or
yeah,
Detroit gentrifying, and so I think what you're trying to get to here is that there's this contradiction where storytellers and artists tell the stories and tell the stories so well
make
to
the city
attract
vibrant.
people to the
Yeah,
cities, but then they themselves are not appreciated, recognized, paid, and
exactly.
ultimately even displaced. Is that?
Exactly. And my role and many artists' role, we're making the city vibrant. We're beautifying the city, through whether it's mural projects, whether it's through my storytelling, whether it's through hosting closed street festival events. We're really putting on for the culture and making it a very attractive place to live at. And but then in the end, it's just like, for who? Like, how is this going to? What does it do for us then? Like, what happens when you want to take my footage and you don't want to pay for it, and then it got to a point. It was like a friendly business conversation. I'm not doing justice of this explaining it, but it was like, I would love to meet. Sure, would love to see what's possible for us to provide my content. It got to a point where they said, but you don't own the content because Knight Foundation funded it. So pretty much saying, give it because you don't own it. So I had to CC the Knight Foundation and just clarify who owns the content, and they said Marlo owns the content, the artist owns the content. And so it was just terrible to see that sort of how it unfolded. And so because it really showed me, you want to support millennials, but what kind of, who which millennials? And what about the millennials in the city that's helping create that kind of vibrancy for you to recruit these new workers and new technology workers out in the city?
Yeah. So a couple of comments. I think so. So one, I think it's something that we're all going to deal with in our careers. We've talked about the creatives and how, you know, it's all about the IP and the content, and it's important to protect that. But of course, these things are happening, and so I guess one question is kind of what are the learnings for all of us from that? And then I guess, you know, if we can move to kind of maybe this topic around gentrification, right? And so just so we all have a clear definition of gentrification, it's basically when higher income folks move into areas which lead to, it really starts with housing, right? And the housing stock changes because the rent prices go up. And the two big, you know, adverse impacts are the displacement of the lower income people that were living there, number one, and the changing in the fabric of the city. And you're seeing that in San Jose, we've seen it in New York, we're seeing it in Detroit, we're seeing it in Boston. And you know, maybe we can kind of move to like, what are your thoughts there in terms of how we do this in a right way? And I know you have some kind of examples around Austin and them doing it.
Yeah. So I wanted to take the advocacy further, and so I I got into the fellowship, the Multicultural Arts Leadership Institute, and short for Molly. And so we that's when I really learned about ways of advocacy in arts and policy initiatives that other cities are doing that San Jose wasn't doing, right? And what I mean by that, of course, at one point I was just like, why are artists always complaining? Like, I mean, why is it the city's responsibility to look out for arts and the cultural arts? And it turns out that a lot more than more than hundreds of cities or hundreds of cities across America have in place policies that can prevent gentrification and as well as the banishment of the culture that existed there prior, or the preservation of a culture prior. And what I mean by that is a developer's tax, right? A 1% developer's tax. You know, cities like Austin, Memphis, Miami, they have these taxes where if someone wants to build in that particular community, 1% of that 1% tax of that development project will go to a fund for cultural, historical, or arts. And so, which is very important. San Jose didn't and doesn't have that because they want to attract and recruit as much developers to the city. And they felt like if they set that up, it would shy away other potential for projects and companies to want to build in San Jose.
I mean, it's amazing too. I mean, I obviously know the Bay Area really well, and I mean, you have probably the most massive amount of income disparity, right? Because you've got Silicon Valley and this massive amount of wealth creation from the Googles and Facebooks and Apples of the world, and yet you have this huge diversity and growing diversity, income inequality, if you will, and it's so they aren't open to these things like the 1% tax that Austin or Memphis are doing.
Definitely, definitely. They're not open to it. There's a group that's doing a lot of advocacy around it, and so um, that would change that pot and that pool of funding would change a lot because certain cities have their own historical districts, they have their own entertainment districts. Memphis is like a beautiful example. They took an old abandoned mall and they transformed it into like a pop shop of like just locals to create their own little stores, and so it's how do we get creative around abandoned spaces, abandoned lots, and how do we make it and position that for the benefit of the cultural arts and anti-gentrification work.
So one thing you've mentioned is kind of this art tax, if you will, and clearly kind of affordable housing seems to be another mechanism, right? So the use of affordable housing. I think there it's important to understand kind of what the median income is and make sure that that's aligned. So from what I understand, I mean, the median income in the Bay Area versus Memphis is totally different. And so to understand kind of the difference in median income and to have affordable housing kind of allocated there, I think is a second point that you're advocating.
Absolutely, and you know, I've been consulting for an organization called Silicon Valley at Home, And what I'm discovering through the research is that when when the city wants to push for affordable housing units, unfortunately, what happens, the neighborhoods, um, they push against it. They push back on the idea of affordable housing around their neighborhoods. But little do they realize that, um, you know, the reason why they're pushing back is because they're concerned about having a lower income there, and crime and etc. But then when you look at the median bracket, when you look at the bracket of what the income level is, these are your teachers, these are your firefighters, these are your police officers. So the people that they're pushing back to seeing want to have affordable housing near their area are actually people that are making the city operate. And so it's kind of striking to see, um, you know, the inability of trying to house people that want to live, work, that want to age in place from where they grew up at.
Right. And then I think we've got a few minutes. The last question, I think, is, so as we all as creatives, as we go out into the world and start our own companies and work with other companies, what are your kind of final closing thoughts in terms of what we as creatives can do and what role we have to play in all this to ensure that we're building equitable and sustainable cities?
You know, I really hope, I hope y'all took something out of this conversation today. If y'all can, like a word or a sentence that stuck with you, I'd really appreciate that feedback. You could put it in the chat box, a word or a sentence that stuck with you, just so I know I done my job to in my role and purpose of sharing my narrative. Um, my advice to creatives, is, you know, I think one, I want to say, how important it is if you do come from a place of privilege, um, whether it's your economic background or your skin color. If you come from a place of privilege, to voice up, speak your voice, and to be an ally. I really want to encourage allyship from our people that come from privilege. Um, and uh, another element, what I also want to encourage the people is that, you know, being a content creator, it's a one-way street. Um, when you're creating content, and you're telling stories for people and organizations, um, it, if you have that passion and that heart for it, then, um, there 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 are people out there that don't want to tell those stories. So if you have that passion to tell those stories, please do it, and uh, really highlight the people that are underrepresented, um, and doing so by paying it forward. Um, and it may seem like, you know, doing a little photo piece or a little documentary on a community affected as trivial, but it really does mean a lot when we get more voices out there. And we're living in a time where that could be highly shared, highly reposted, um, and it really does impact the communities that are affected when we can have attention around something of an issue that normally wouldn't get traction. Um, and lastly, you know, just like, you guys heard of my career and my arc of what I've done, um, it's not. I don't think it gets easy. I think you get stronger. I think you get smarter. And if you're having any doubts about what you do as an artist and where you find yourself, um, as long as you remember the compass and that and not the clock. And what I mean by that is, always when you're always thinking about the direction of where you want to go, as opposed to when you're going to get there. I think that's the most important aspect of my journey as a filmmaker. It's not about when I'll get there. It's just about, as long as I'm heading towards that right direction, as long as I'm heading towards the direction where I feel like is where my career will take me. And that kind of mentality has allowed me to not have, you know, burnout or affected by, um, you know, the results of expectations. And yeah. By any media necessary, go out there, find a way, navigate through the system, and staying true to yourself. Um, that's been, you know, the motto that I've lived by, and you know, just seeing the success that I've been able to do. I'm just very thankful and grateful.
No, listen, I think that was eloquently put. Thank you for sharing that. we've got a couple questions. I'm going to turn it to the group, and then we'll take the pick. So we have one from Emmy here asking, what is the work like with Warner Philippines? How do you collaborate intercontinentally? And is your community engagement, social justice a part of your work there as well?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And thank you everybody for mentioning what you mentioned in the chat box right now. Thank you. It really hits me. Thank you. So my work with Warner Philippines right now, I'm working with an artist. His name is It's Julius. I'm gonna throw his name out here right here. And I'm also working for a record label called Audio Near. And so they're known for Audio Near is known for representing artists like Jocelyn Enriquez, a lot of who was a really big freestyle artist in the 90s. And so I'm working and coordinating with Audio Near. I'm working for an artist named That Real Julius. And so they picked up 3 songs from my artist. And so now I'm doing music videos for him. We're actually releasing the first music video called Laps, and that's dropping on Sunday at 5:30 p.m. I'm hella proud of that work. Like I just feel like I'm at a time in my career where I've told stories from many other communities, and now I'm getting back to my why. And it was to see our faces on the screen. When people think about Asians, it's finally getting representation, and that's cool. But you don't see Filipinos up on the screen, or Pinoys or Pinoys. And so I'm finally doing a music video where it's all Pinoy Pinay cast and a Pinoy back film crew. And so it's it's a lot of fun. Asian Pacific Islanders.
Hey, that's awesome. I know we shared the little clip, but if you could share the final video, I'm sure we'd all love to see it.
Hell yeah. So I'll share it with you, Sanjay, and then maybe you can send it to the class. And I really feel like it culminates my body of work from what I've been doing in the last 12 years. And so it's like my take of like a Filipino romantic love story. So, and you don't got to be Filipino to watch it or listen to it or whatever. I just really want y'all I hope America can look at us in a way where they could see the universality. And in Asian American studies, we call it the race triangular theory. And it's this idea that that there could only be 2 races, right? There could only be either you're white or black, and then Latinos and Asians are kind of like outside of this kind of construct. And so really trying to show us as Americans and show us beyond just being categorized as our culture. So I hope the story through love and comedy and through good ass R&B music for real can connect with people.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, Harry has a question. Harry, if you want to ask it.
Hey, first of all, I just want to say thanks for being here. It's been great so far.
I was just Space Jam poster. Look at you.
Oh yeah, that's my roommate, but I love the movie.
Okay.
Yeah, so you were talking about in Memphis how they turned the abandoned mall into like a pop-up shop area, and I was just gonna wonder like how essential do you think creativity is to this, and then like us as creatives, us going into the creative industry, how much of our problem is it? Like I believe that we are the ones that have to fix this problem of gentrification and just race issues. Do you think that, I know you took it up on yourself, and do you think that it is our problem and it is our fight?
Yeah, I think whatever community you associate yourself with, like if you're a creative and you're associate yourself as part of the creative community, I think it is our responsibility, because you could see other creatives in different mediums where they're being affected, and they're being affected through not having a place to live or the cost of living being too high. And so if you identify as a creative, no matter what your medium is, that is your fellow community member, right? Whether it's like a sculptor, right? We're totally 2 different worlds. I'm on music video sets and he or she's like making like statues, like, but we're creatives. And so I see that person as creating something that's not like really tangible, like in the system of like capitalism. Like it can't be like sold and distributed in a way that could, be a part of that construct. But yeah, so to answer that, yeah, it's the community that you're a part of, right? That you're affiliated with. And there are creative ways that we can provide those opportunities, right? Taking over that strip mall and allowing an opportunity for people to sell their own crafts and work. You're creating a more inclusive economy. And I think that's one of the most essential things that we're trying to do is how do we create a more inclusive economy for our artists? How do we allow them to live, work, and play? There was an incident that occurred in Oakland where people died in the fire in that warehouse. And it really hit people in the Bay Area because a lot of these folks, very talented artists, just didn't have a place where they could live to do their work and art. And so the desperation of, or the circumstance of living in a warehouse that, was that didn't have the conditions for them to survive. Like it was, they had no other choice but to live in a warehouse like that. And unfortunately, it was a place that didn't meet fire code. And when a fire caught on fire, people were trapped in there. It's definitely our initiative, and we're finding creative ways to do that. And I think the most effective way to be anti-gentrification is policy work. Doing more than us, complaining about it, but actually what are results and solutions that we can do. And I think that's been like my journey as a storyteller. When we launched Local Color, we took over a Ross building. It used to be a Ross building. It got abandoned. Ross abandoned it. And we took over this 20,000 square foot empty Ross building. And we had like 30 like artists set up their little shops in that Ross building. And it was just amazing. It was just so energizing to see a place in downtown ran, owned by the locals. And yeah, unfortunately, Local Color no longer exists. But when they had their run, it was a good year and a half. It was amazing. There was like 70 events thrown every month. It's just, it's what does it look like when you have artists and people from that community take agency of a space and allow others to come into it? And that's when you see true community, like true community spirit, collaboration, intergenerational building. And so, yeah, man, like we see this happening all across the country, and I hope you can make it come to life in your city, right? And there's so many different projects that you can do. Close off a street, put picnic tables around, and just invite people for a cookout, right? Another one was where people just painted bicycle lanes because there were no bicycle lanes in their neighborhood. And so when they painted it, the city said, we have no budget for it. They just took it upon themselves to paint bicycle lanes. And now there was just more traffic of people and families riding their bicycles. This is what we're talking about when we talk about anti-gentrification work, right? It's like, how do we get creative in creating a city more livable? And really appreciate that question.
Let me ask you, are there any other questions for Marlo before we conclude?
And yeah, I got like a solid 10 minutes. So if y'all have any questions, please don't be shy. Whether it's filmmaking, running a company, whatever it may be.
I think Tammy Laura has one. Tammy Laura?
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hey, what's up?
Hi. I think it's so cool, like how you have been using like your creative talents to like give back and everything. And you're like, from all the work that you're talking about that you've done, how do you, because I feel like as creatives, it's really easy for people to kind of put us in a box and kind of like say like, okay, like this is where you fit in. And like, it can be difficult to like branch into other things and explore different things. And at the same time, like be balanced in a way. I don't know if that makes sense. So how, as like a creative individual, have you been able to kind of balance yourself, but still like be versatile and try different things and not let people like put you in a box? Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, that's a good question. We kind of live in this society, like in order to be seen as a specialist, you have to only just be doing that one thing, right? And so people tend to like put us in a box, like, oh, he or she ain't a master at it because they're doing many different mediums, right? And so that's kind of what the critique that we've seen like in our society today, right? But to answer your question, at one point, I think this is my question to y'all, is like, at one point, do you stop giving a fuck about the validation from others, right? At one point, do you like stop caring about the validation or how others are categorizing you? And I feel like once you pass that, then you become a true artist. And I know it sounds super like, kind of corny or like even just simplified. But when you get past this idea of like, who cares what people are thinking of what I create, then that's when I feel like you're truly an artist. Because as an artist, you're expressing, right? You're expressing, not caring about the numbers, not caring about the attention, but you're actually creating something because you feel like this is a true, honest form of expression of oneself, right? How does one, the perception of art is it could be it's subjective, right? There's no like objectivity to the beauty of a particular art form or piece. And so I think when you get to this kind of aspect of like going beyond what others are thinking of what you're creating, I think you're honestly expressing yourself, right? Two, this idea of how do you find balance? I think you have to find where you can find insatiable curiosity in. Strength isn't just about what you're good at. Strength is what you're good at, and you just have insatiable curiosity to want to keep learning and want to keep heading towards that direction, right? And so once you find what that is, I feel like you could always dibble and dabble in different forms, but when you find the one that you have a strength in, and this unstoppable curiosity for, then I think you found a spot in the creative form that you have a niche in and that you have a niche for, and lastly too is just finding that balance, right? I think the discipline is so important for artists. I think a lot of artists may not see discipline as an essential piece of what we do. But I think if you can create like a systematic schedule and you treat your art form like a martial art, or like you treat your art form like a skill to get better at, I think you'll be able to see the results that you want out of it. So yeah, one, the validation from others, like when you truly reach a point of honestly expressing yourself, I think you found a position of being a true creative. Two is what was two? My bad. I'm gonna forget it here. I know that three was the discipline component. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
For sure. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, that is
So,
great.
Marlo, that was just fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your insights. I know I got a lot out of it, and it was authentic and heart touching as well. So really can't thank you enough. Before you leave, can we all, if I could ask the folks on the call, would you guys mind sharing your screen, and we'll take one picture together. Tammy Lord, could you do that? Yes.
Cool. So I just left my IG handle in the chat, as well as like my email. Thank you everybody for having me here. If anyone would like to connect with me afterwards, and just follow me on my journey, and for me to follow your guys' journey, I'd love to be there and witness your growth and provide any support that I can.
No, it was wonderful, Marlo. So I think we've got the gallery here. I'm going to take one picture before we close. All right.
Okay.
All right, Tammy Laura, are you okay taking it? You got it? Okay, we'll all look at the camera. Yeah, I got your swag too, Marlo.
That's what's up.
We good? We can't hear you.
I'm doing a screenshot like on my computer, and then I'm going to take one with my phone. So
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Tell us when.
Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
All right. So, okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and okay, and then one more. Turning on my phone. All right. 1, 2, 3, and got
Thank
it.
you. Thank you, Tabulor. I tried to do this last week, but it didn't work because we didn't have everybody on and nobody was looking at the camera. So
Oh,
now at least we have it for our marketing and social media purposes. So listen, thank you all for joining us. I think it's been a real pleasure. And Marla, we can't thank you enough for taking the time, sharing your insights. I think it was really authentic. I got a lot out of it, and I'm sure the rest of the college did as well. So listen, I'll be in touch, and thank you once again. And thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you, everybody.